A postgraduate degree refers to advanced academic programs pursued after completing a bachelor's degree. This can include master's degrees, doctorates, and other professional degrees, including JDs for law, MDs for medicine, and MBAs for business. Are postgraduate degrees worth it?
Let's talk about it.
Welcome to Net with Lizzy and Lissa, where we analyze hidden costs and empower you to make your own damn decisions in life. Each episode covers a different facet of life, and at the end of each episode, we each give our takes on whether we think something is net positive or net negative.
I'm Lizzy, a strategist and consultant with almost 20 years of experience in finance and investing.
And I'm Lissa, a personal finance expert and a certified financial planner. We're best friends who talk about money
and everything else.
In today's episode, we are discussing postgraduate education, which can be a major financial decision for most people. However, we want to remind you that this episode is informational and educational in nature and should not be misconstrued as financial advice. We share our experiences to help educate, but you should always consult with a professional for guidance as needed. Are postgraduate degrees worth it?
First up, running the numbers on postgraduate degrees.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, workers' earnings increase as educational attainment rises, with median weekly earnings more than double for those with a professional degree compared to someone with just an associate's degree.
Wow.
Yeah.
But earnings are only one side of the story. Last year, the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity published a white paper that dug into the ROI, that's the return on investment of education. It turns out that while some postgraduate degrees offer substantial financial returns, nearly 43% of master's programs have a negative ROI due to high costs and modest earning gains.
Yeah, I have a theory on why that is, but we'll talk about that in the episode. Interestingly, the same white paper said that doctoral and professional degrees have a 77% positive ROI.
Damn, that's a big difference.
Very big difference.
All right. Of course, a lot of this depends on specific degrees and fields of study. For example, engineering and computer science master's degrees can earn between $88,000 and $110,000 annually on average, while degrees in arts and humanities often yield lower financial returns.
Well, we know there's more to life than numbers and statistics, so let's talk about it. Are postgraduate degrees worth it?
All right, we got a lot to say, I'm sure.
Context, you have a postgraduate degree.
I have a postgraduate degree. So my background, I studied communications at UCLA, as did Lissa, and frankly, I just didn't know what to do after that. I graduated, and it felt like getting a bachelor's degree fulfilled all of the requirements I was supposed to do as an adult. And I pursued a bunch of different options. I thought about going to fashion school. I looked into an MBA program. I ended up going to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. Side note, I'm sure I've talked about on another episode because I was chasing a boy. But I entered into this design and technology program. So my master's degree is in media, arts, and technology, basically computer design, development, graphic design.
So that was a master's program, and you took no time off. You went directly after your bachelor's?
6 months off.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I just wasn't ready to just be working because I had worked in a professional, full-time job all through college. And I was just like searching for something else.
Yeah.
And so I thought, why not? And as far as master's degrees go, it was fairly affordable, I'll say. I didn't have any student loans or any debt from undergraduate. I want to say the tuition, this was a private school, but it was about $30,000, I think, a year. It was a 2-year program. But I did do a graduate assistantship, which is basically like a part-time job.
Yeah.
That got me free tuition and a stipend.
For the whole...
No, I did it. So I started spring semester. I got the assistantship the following fall, and I did it that spring. My last semester, they were fucking crazy. I couldn't do it anymore. The people I worked with, I was like, I'd rather take on loans.
But so up until that point, it was fully covered tuition as you worked?
For a year of my 2 years, I had free tuition. I had to pay my
Nice.
living expenses, so I still
Yeah.
had a regular job,
Yeah.
and it was a small stipend. So I think I ended up with like 1 year of tuition in debt, which was like maybe 30,000,
Yeah.
and eventually I paid it off. But
Got it.
it can be a lot worse
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
And so that's a Master of
That's
Science.
a Master of Science in
Media
I think it's
Arts
Media Arts
and Technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which means a lot of things because it was this interesting degree program, which we can go into.
Yeah.
All right, what about you?
So kind of similar to you, when I was at UCLA getting my bachelor's in communications, we just so happen to have the same
Yeah.
major, I was thinking that at that time, I needed something else to stand out from in the job pool. I think I had applied to so many internships during college. Some I got, a lot I didn't get, and I was like, how can I stand out in this job pool? So that was part of the reason, and I think another reason was I wasn't ready to work yet. So I was
Yeah.
like, I need to keep going to school.
Yeah.
I didn't mind school. Like, school was kind of fun to me, and I didn't really. It didn't really make sense to me what the cost was at that time, because my parents were helping, and by helping, they were partially paying, and partially relying on scholarships and loans, and then partially it was me having to work as well. So I didn't really understand the full picture of how much education cost at the time. I just knew it was important, definitely in my culture. And so while I was in college at UCLA, I was like, I need something else. I actually applied to do 2 different things. Teach for America, which is an organization that places you to teach somewhere in the nation where they need more teachers, which is a job, you get paid for it. Or I also applied to a grad program at USC, the University of Southern California. And right when I was making the decision to whether I should become a teacher and do Teach for America, I got my acceptance into USC, and I was like, yeah, I'd rather just go to school some more and get a master's degree. The word master's felt cool. I was like, I didn't really know. I think when I first told my mom, she had mixed feelings because she's very supportive of education. She was a teacher. She was an immigrant. So it's like education is so important. But she also knew that, like, okay, why'd you have to pick a private school? Like, I can't remember the exact cost. It was somewhere around what Liz said, like $30K per year. It was around that.
Yeah.
I just know that in terms of paying for units, at the time at UCLA, I remember one unit being like, I don't know, like $400, something like that. So to take a class, it was like, I don't know, 4 units, 5 units. Yeah. At USC, I remember it being more like 4,000. It was like so much more. It was something like that where it was like, oh, we're playing, with different cards here. So anyway, that's what led me to getting my master's. Also it was called Master's in Communication Management, and I had a focus in entertainment. And that's because I wanted to work in the entertainment field. In my career, I was like, I want to work, I don't know, on a film studio. I don't even know what it meant at the time.
Yeah.
I just knew.
You're young.
Yeah, I needed more degrees. That's what it was. And then I got it. So that's why I ended up with a master's.
And then how much financially did you end up with a lot of debt? Did it like set you back?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I already had some debt from undergrad. We took out loans. My mom helped, like, in order for us to be able to pay for, like, living costs, I think my mom and dad were pulling from their home equity line of credit. So luckily we owned our home. So that was part of it, but we also took out a lot of loans, mostly federal loans. So I had some loans coming out of undergrad. I want to say, I have to ask my mom for the exact numbers, but it's maybe between 10 and 20,000.
Okay.
But then when I went to grad school, that added another 50, 60,000. Yes. So I left school with like 70K plus in student loans. And I, too, did a stipend assistantship thingy. I don't even know what it was called. I worked for a professor, but that only covered like 10K of tuition.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, out of the 60K that I signed up for. So, yes, I walked away with a lot of debt. And then my first job out of grad school was getting paid like $29K a year. So it was like I took on all this debt and I'm getting paid so little for having a master's.
Defer, or how did you handle Were you even able to make payments?
Yeah, the way that I remember it at the time was initially I did the program where like your first year or two has lower payments.
Yeah, it's like a graduate.
It's like it's like a transition period. So that was fine. And then the payments ballooned after that, and I just struggled. Like I was going in deeper in debt because I was using credit cards to fund my life. Luckily, 2 years after being in the workforce, making that low salary, I got hired at Google. So my salary jumped up, and then soon after, I was able to like really start paying down my debts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does Google, I know they have like a lot of transparency around salaries. Do they specifically pay more for graduate degrees?
What do you mean?
Like, do you get a bump? A base salary, do you get a bump if you have higher education?
You know what? I don't know. I don't, for me, the way that when we'll talk about like the benefits of getting a master's degree, what I think my master's degree helped with was, when I applied at Google, I actually just applied online. I didn't have a referral. I didn't have a point of contact. I just applied online. And what the recruiter told me after was the job that I got was only posted for like a day because they got like over 1,000 resumes in one day.
Wow.
And so, they have technology that helps sift through these resumes. So I want to believe that me having a master's helped me break through that, first vetting of the resumes, because it was an admin assistant job. It was like an administrative job that you don't need, you don't need a master's to do admin work. But in order to get in the door, I felt like having something on my resume helped me.
Yeah, I could see that. I think even when I've looked at resumes for hiring, or, I've been in only one similar experience, I think it's like an extra notch in your belt, even if it's not directly applicable to the job, which there's something to that, right? It shows a dedication to your education, to learning. There are some kind of inherent things you can infer from that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's worth it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so what did you learn? Like, what did you learn in your master's program, and do you use it?
Yeah. So I think my situation was a little unique because mine was almost a career shift by doing this program. One caveat, so I really wanted to do an MBA program. And I was only 21 when I graduated from UCLA. I was very young, but I had been working in an agency for almost 4 years. So a lot of MBA programs require you to have pretty extensive work experience. And so most people don't apply until they're like 28 or so. And I was very frustrated by that fact because I thought, well, like I already do have work experience. And there's probably other reasons. I think maybe I applied to a couple programs. I don't remember exactly. But the program I entered in had 2 concentrations. One was advertising. The other was design and development. I started in the advertising and realized on like the first day, I could probably teach this class because I've been working in an agency. And it was also, LA is very different from Pittsburgh. My real world experience here was probably a little more sophisticated than like the person who had been teaching advertising but not doing it. And so I was like, all right, I'll do design and development. And really what this spoke to was my desire my whole life to do something artistic, but to feel like I had to do something academic. So I had forced myself down this academic path when really I'm a creative person. Since I was a little kid, I wanted to be an artist. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, let me just dabble in design.
Yeah.
This program didn't require a portfolio to get in. And so it was kind of like a ground up graphic design and design principles program with web development mixed in. And that enabled me, but in the agency I'd been doing copywriting and strategy. Then I shifted and did design and development and kind of did everything from that point. So I learned a ton. I will say the program was easy. It was I don't know if it's compared to LA or UCLA, or it felt like middle school classes.
Wow.
So I took it upon myself to make every project really challenging, to add in. I did like 3 independent study classes because I wanted to learn. So I did. I got a lot out of it because I made myself get a lot out of it. But it was easy.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And you get to call yourself a master. You got a master's.
So I learned a lot, but I didn't need it. I could have learned all of those things on my own. And I tell people that all the time, particularly for this field. It did help me, though, to have the structure.
Yeah, you probably could have learned all that on YouTube.
Yeah, 100%. And probably better, to be honest.
Crazy. Dang.
Yeah. All right, what about you?
I don't know. My master's was, the kind of classes I took were in like film theory. I took a really cool class on sci-fi films, which I thought was interesting because now when I watch TV and movies, like part of me is picking out the themes that they're trying to say.
That's cool.
You know. But anyone can do that. You don't need a degree to do that. There was like another class I took on charisma, because communications is a lot about, like, especially being a public figure, like having charisma is like this X factor that you can't always teach, that like some people have, but there are specific qualities. So it was kind of like analyzing and learning things that I wouldn't have known to go out and learn on my own unless you just watch a lot of, like documentaries and things like that. But did I ever need it for the future of my career? No. I think it was just like the stamp, the piece of paper, putting it on my resume is what helped me in my career. Not to say, like, the program I thought was cool. And I'm still friends with a few people that I met in grad school. And especially in Los Angeles, like, there are some schools, like, as you all know, right, there's Ivy League schools. There's certain schools that if you have an association with them, it just helps out your network. So UCLA, for me, and University of Southern California has, like, an extensive network in all fields, but definitely in the entertainment field here in LA. So just having that and, like, as a conversation starter around the city, I think has been helpful. But again, like, nothing that I would think that you would have needed to pay $60,000 for a degree for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I don't regret it.
Yeah.
But there are so many other ways to go about it.
Well, that stat we opened up with was the difference between a master's degree, which both Liz and I have master's degrees in these various fields that, like, no one even thinks of, right, to get a master's. And then you have the more professional degrees, like JD is a Juris Doctor.
So.
Sorry. And then MD for medical, and then MBA, which you alluded to, Masters of Business Administration, which are very unique, kind of like postgraduate degrees that have, I think, a lot more status.
For sure.
Across whatever industries they're in. And they also, like, do you need a JD to practice law?
Yes.
Right.
There is a loophole. I know this because of Kim Kardashian, where you can get a certain amount of, like, kind of like apprenticeship hours and then still be eligible to take your bar. I might get that detail wrong, but she didn't go to law school, but she's, like, studying.
Right.
But typically,
and same with, like, to be a doctor, you have to go to med school.
Yeah. So I have a couple other examples of just people in my life that I'll share. So my mom got her master's degree, and one note on, like, why it was meaningful to me, no one in my family had ever gotten a master's degree. And in my immediate family, no one else had a bachelor's degree. So I got a bachelor's degree, or my mom got it, like, the same time I did. But then I was the first person to get a master's, so that was like a badge for me.
Yeah.
And then she went and got hers in counseling. But she's a teacher, or was a teacher, now is a counselor. But for most school districts, there's a very specific formula, basically, for the number of graduate units that you have, add more pay. And it's not degrees, it's units.
Oh, wow.
So she was able, with her graduate degree and a couple other, like, classes she took, max out her salary, where as a teacher, you typically think you're maybe making like $50,000. She made over $100,000, which is a great salary as a teacher because she had these graduate degrees.
Yeah.
And so, that's one note. I have one of my other best friends is a doctor, took on loads of debt at a private school in med school, did a 1-year master's, living expenses for years and years and years, but is making millions of dollars,
right.
So, but that was a grind.
Yeah.
So there can be that trade-off.
Yeah, I think when there's nothing else, right? Like depending on your background, where you come from, if you don't have any connections or like other like legacy ways of getting into an industry or a company or getting paid more,
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to rely on things that are more accessible. And not to say that all education is accessible, right? There's still like rigorous application processes.
For sure.
But it is in a way an equalizer or a way to get ahead of others if you can navigate it in the right way.
Yeah.
So the stat was that some professional degrees have like 77% of those types of degrees have a positive ROI, meaning you might spend a couple $100,000
Right.
like on med school, but you'll make that back in a couple years.
Yeah.
Whereas there's some programs that I know of, like a big one, and I don't know what the landscape is today, but definitely in the last 5 to 10 years, I've seen a lot of friends go to get their doctorate for physical therapy, and the salary range just doesn't match up to what they're paying for school.
Sure.
Compared to like a doctor and MD, it takes a lot longer to recoup the costs of that education, depending on where you go to school.
Yeah.
Like I've seen that a lot. Like certain fields don't pay back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it also depends on why are you doing it.
Yeah.
Which I think that's kind of at the root of it. So, you can do it because it's an investment in your long-term earning power or in your career. Maybe a requirement to do a certain job or get to a certain level. You can do it because you want to learn.
Yeah.
Or because you want to prove to yourself that you can. So my ex, while we were together, got his doctorate. And I think for him, it was like, to see if I can.
Yeah.
And he's probably not going to make more money because of it or incrementally more. It's an education. It's not, a high paying field, but there is value in that of just the achievement and kind of like the Everest, like why not? Because I can.
I used to struggle with that because for a long time I associated more degrees with, like, the whole point is so that you can earn more and make more.
Yeah.
Even though there is an element of status and pride, there's other things you get along with a degree. But I used to primarily associate it with more money. Then I think like throughout my adulthood, I started to see those other sides. I've actually worked with some clients who like are in their 30s, 40s, wanting to go back to school, and I don't say no, don't do that, but I really dig into people about like why do you want to go? Because this is a big life shift, right? It's gonna affect your time and energy as well as your earning potential, both directions, right?
Sure.
While you're in school, you might not be able to earn as much, and then afterwards, maybe you can make more, but it's not promised.
Right.
So something that there was one client that I talked to, and she was like, I just want to go, and it was to prove that she could do it. And I think a big part of it was to prove to her parents that she could do it. And I'm like, that's where I'm
Which is loaded, right?
It's very loaded because I'm like, that's cool and all, but I also have this like philosophical, I don't know, thought as an adult now is like, at what point are you not living for your parents and you're living for yourself?
Yeah.
So like, are you going to spend, you're going to take on so much debt to make somebody else proud of you?
Right. When they're probably already proud of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, and one other thing I want to mention, because this is just an interesting reason with my ex, it was less than 1% of African Americans have a doctorate. And so there's also this representation angle, right? Of being in those rooms, contributing to this education and the research and being that voice and showing other people that they could do it, because that's what got him down the path. Seeing a black woman with a doctorate inspired him. So that's meaningful too, even if it has nothing to do with your salary.
Yeah, but which is crazy because then you're taking on the burden of the financial cost.
And who says you have to do that or want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's detail out the costs.
Yeah.
We've got the cost of tuition, which can be extensive, up to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mental health costs.
Mental health costs. Let's dig into it.
Well, I think there's a difference too. Both of us went to grad school relatively soon after our bachelor's, so we hadn't even experienced real adulthood, real life yet. At least, you know.
We hadn't been burnt out yet.
Not yet,
by
right?
life.
But there are folks who go back to school later.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mixed bag. I think for some people, you know, they have a financial cushion, they've lived some life, they're doing it because they have the energy and the time to. I think other people do it out of desperation of like trying to switch career fields or to try to make more money, and do it when they don't have a financial backing. So like now you're going back to school with stress. Like you're stressing yourself out with having to study and you know, use your mental capacity like to the max.
Right.
While also having to think about your everyday life, especially if you have a family or kids to support.
Yeah. Well, and there is a distinction somewhat of, are you doing a full-time graduate program where you're not able to work?
Yeah.
Like, for example, med school.
Yeah.
Or like a lot of nursing schools, you can't have a job.
Yeah.
And so then how are you going to live? And that's an additional financial cost. And are there loans that can cover that? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That is a stressor.
Yeah.
And then you're putting your earning power, you're moving forward, that feeling of moving forward in life on hold.
Yeah.
Right? People around you have started their careers, they may be making money, you're still building.
Yeah.
So that is a financial and mental health cost.
Yeah.
But then there's also, you're working full time or part time or full time and doing this on top of that.
Yeah.
Which is a drain.
Yeah. So like the potential for burnout, mental and physical burnout.
Yeah.
Major risk and cost to doing postgraduate degrees in your adulthood.
Seriously, yeah. And sacrifice, right? You're not going to have the same time, free time and time with friends. You may, depending on when you do it in your life, you may feel like you're missing out, you know? My friend I mentioned, that's a doctor. She was in school for 16 years. She had 4 kids in that process.
Oh my God.
How, you know, you're not going to have the same parental experience with those kids when you're in med school or in a residency and becoming a doctor.
Yeah.
It's a sacrifice for their future, but that is a sacrifice.
Yeah. Of your present and yeah, that's
or
crazy.
like even just us, you know, I moved away for 2 years in my very early 20s and missed out on a lot.
Yeah.
And had this weird time of being isolated and not really having friends and you know, missing some prime years.
Yeah. Well, I would say that back on the financial cost, but as it relates to the mental health cost, because I took on so much debt with student loans and I started my career making like pennies, I had stress every day. Pressure. Like, do I got to move back home? What if I can't hack it in Los Angeles? Like, I can't sustain this for long. All right, I got to eat ramen noodles. Like, I got to be cheap with my lifestyle. There was like a lot of things that I was like, just the stress of not knowing if you're going to make it or not.
Well, that's a really great point because it doesn't end. The financial stress doesn't end when you get the degree.
Yeah.
If anything, it only begins.
Adds more.
I remember one of our close friends went to a private school for counseling. And just offhand one day, she's your age, I think, a couple years older than me, mentioned that when she graduated, her student loans were like $900 a month or something. And at the time, you know, we were still pretty young. I was like, oh my God, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And that is pressure.
Mm-hmm. That's how mine ballooned into like $900 a month. It was like, I know one of my payments was $725. I remember, it's like it etched into my brain. And then there was like another payment that I was making too. And I'm like, that's my whole paycheck.
Yeah, seriously. And then, you know, it just accrues interest.
Yeah.
You know, I have someone in my life that's like, I will never pay off my student loans. They're like, it's just never going to happen. It'll exist for my entire life. I'll die with them. That's just their attitude on it. They're like, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
That is an overwhelming burden.
Yeah.
That feeling of like you're suffocating from it.
Yeah.
You can't get out from under.
I got a dumb question.
Okay.
So like, you know, tuition costs so much, undergrad, graduate. What is this money being used for? To pay professors and stuff? Like, obviously, like campuses. Like, what is it paying for?
I think it's a lot of things. I don't really know, but I think, you know, certainly professors and cost of facilities, the whole administration. Like, it's a big, you know, depending on the school, it's a big living, breathing organization.
Yeah. I get when it funds like research universities that are doing science.
Yeah.
For, but it racks my brain. Like, what is it being used for? Like the plaques on the wall that you see when you walk through a hallway. Like, because that's what annoys me.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you think this has changed. Do you think that postgraduate degrees are going to continue to be a differentiator for people in the workforce?
This is just a perception. I have kind of two directions with it. From everything I've heard over the past several years, especially post-pandemic, a bachelor's degree is considered table stakes. It's like, duh, everyone has one. And it's been really hard to get a job. And so I think a lot of people are feeling like they need a bachelor or a postgraduate degree to differentiate themselves, or because they just can't get work. And so they need to do something. Mm-hmm. That said, there's also this other shift of entrepreneurship. Kind of like I said, the skills I learned, you can learn online. Mm-hmm. And especially in technology, like you don't necessarily need a formal education. The way like AI is changing the workforce is going to be interesting. So I kind of think it depends what field you go into, but there's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I kind of feel the same. Your master's, you learned some actual tangible skills, and I don't feel like I got that out of my master's program.
Yeah.
But I feel like tangible skills are the things you can go to trade school for or go like take online courses for.
Yeah.
But you just don't have the degree. But you can if you can design stuff, if you can write stuff, like if you have skills, all you got to do is show those skills and you can get hired, right? Like so like do you actually need the degree in those scenarios?
It's interesting. I think that's a great point, and that was one of the big differences between undergraduate, which at UCLA was very theoretical, which I value. That taught me how to think. Yeah. But this was very practical. Like sit on a computer. How do you use Illustrator? Yeah. You know, it's probably a high cost to pay. Yeah. For those skills. And I do want to say I learned more from working with a very good designer and just watching her and learning how she did things than I did in this program. Yeah. I will also say, having hired dozens of designers now, and most of the ones who were like more formally educated didn't have that foundational knowledge. Not that I got here, that I got from that other designer. Yeah. Like very specific things, if you know design, of like using a grid and making things pixel perfect. Like things that I feel like it's like counting, you know, like it's like a multiplication tables, you know?
But that's why like you have that skill. So all you need is a portfolio. Yeah. Or a chance to show you can do it, and then you can get a job.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell people all the time, to do my job, even now, you don't even need a bachelor's degree. Yeah. But you need to know how to think, and you have to have a lot of skills and acquire them. And so
you need an entry point, right? You need someone to help get you in the door.
So it's honestly, it's hard for me to say that having a master's degree has helped my career. Like the badge value of having it, because I was already in a job when I got it, and I stayed there for 5 more years. I got one more job after that, and I'm sure it helped. Yeah. But I think I could have gotten that job anyway. And then I've been in entrepreneurial situations ever since where it didn't matter. Right. So probably not, other than what I learned. Yeah.
So would you ever go back to get another postgraduate degree? I know you're working on a certification. We talked about that, but postgrad degree.
I've thought about it because I actually love school. I really love to learn. Yeah. And I value it. I think there's something cool about the badge value of it, and I have a lot of respect for it. There's actually just nothing that really makes sense for me other than being academic. So like in media, in technology, in design, you can get a doctorate, I guess, but it would be more in like the study of communication.
To do research.
And, you know, maybe in finance, but I don't know. If anything now, I do wish I had an MBA. Yeah. That's where I've learned so much about business by being in business and picking up the pieces. And I've taken online classes, but there are certain things, even stupid things like an acronym or a way of approaching a problem that are so foundational in business school that I've had to play catch up on. Or I'm learning from people that are, 20 years later in their career, and I'm like Googling stuff.
Yeah.
So I do think from a educational standpoint and a networking standpoint, an MBA would have been very valuable for me. All right.
At one point, I applied for a PhD program. Did I ever tell you that?
No, you never told me that.
I got rejected.
Where and what was it?
USC. I don't know. Communications?
Yeah.
So I was just following the path. I was
Sure,
like, all right,
yeah.
got the master's. This was sometime while I was already working at Google. And they have great educational reimbursement programs where even if it's not related to your job, you can get some reimbursed, like a little bit. So like for personal development, I applied thinking just to explore the route of doing a PhD, which would be more in research, like research in entertainment, media, and communications. And I got rejected, and I got so hurt by it because I was like, dang, I've gotten accepted to all these other things that I've done throughout my education and career.
I get that.
But in hindsight, I'm so glad I got rejected.
Yeah,
because it led me a different path.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have wanted to take on more loans just to call myself a doctor, which is funny, like to be a doctor but not be a doctor.
Right. You know what that made me think of, though? Something that I do value, I've realized, like being an expert in something. So I am clearly like a jack of all trades. I have a broad range of skills, and I'm very good at a lot of things, but I'm not like a specialist or an expert in something. And there's value to me in being a thought leader, whether it's, whatever kind of doctor or that like kind of terminal degree where you have a specialty and you are the voice in the room on this subject. I think that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's usually associated with research-oriented programs, but, that's really just like it appeals to me because I think it's cool.
Yeah. Do you remember when I got my CFP certification not too long ago? I told you that the units that I got, because I had to take 6 or 7 classes, grad level classes, and they count towards a master's in finance. I still have to take a few more classes, but I'm already like more than halfway there. Oh. And so we were talking about like, should I just get the master's?
Yeah.
So when I looked up the cost, I don't remember the cost. It's definitely at least like $10,000 more, something like that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna put that to the side for now because why? Yeah. Like, why would I do that? Like, do you think I should?
Because it's cool. I don't know. I value education inherently. I don't know why. Yeah. I just think it's cool. So
to have a second master's, like now you just have like degrees on degrees on degrees.
I have a funny example of this. So I mentioned I was the first in my family to get a master's. Then my mom got hers. My sister raised 3 kids and then went back to school later, and so she got her bachelor's. I'm going to mess this up, but I think she double majored in linguistics and Spanish, and then did a dual master's program that I think was also in linguistics and ESL, English as a second language education, something like that. The idea was to teach. Then I think she had a hard time. She wanted to do a doctorate. That was her long-term plan. She didn't get accepted. And so she found this other master's program. So that was a 1-year like accelerated master's that was very, very targeted. Yeah. So she got if I'm not messing this up, a 3rd master's degree and then ended up teaching. And now she teaches high school. She teaches like a lot of second language learners. It's been really interesting to see her comfort with education, and then the challenge she felt transitioning into the application of that.
Yeah.
And not like a judgment, but I think some people are very comfortable with school. I'm very comfortable with school. It has parameters. I know how to win at it.
Yeah.
Real life or, career, work, entrepreneurship, a lot. You don't just get a grade, you know, you have to kind of forge that path for yourself. So I think that can be really challenging, and I think that's one of the reasons I fled back to that comfort of school. Structure, yeah. But it's important to note that you could have all the degrees in the world. is not the same as the real world application.
Agree.
Yeah. And I think I took that for granted when I was younger and like, oh, I know a lot about this and I have enough experience. Like,
Yeah.
doing it is the best education in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, similar to you, now that I have my own businesses and I learned a lot in business, working in tech, working on the business side of things, I also wish that I had gotten my MBA. I still could in the future.
Sure.
It's more like, what value would that add to me compared to the cost? Like, what's the ROI?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that would have been a more focused degree that would have had real world applications compared to the master's that I did get.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I learned some cool stuff and it was fun, but like, do I use that stuff?
Yeah.
In my particular case, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to point out about MBAs, we kind of alluded to it, depends on the program, but generally the networking and job placement from an MBA program is incredible, especially if you're in a ranked program. That is one area where the badge value is actually meaningful, I would say, and translates like, oh, you have an MBA from Chicago or University of Chicago, like Booth, you will have a good career.
Yeah.
And because of the network, because of how they match you, because it is valued. So I would say typically those things pay off if you're going through a structured path of working up a corporate ladder, or potentially if you're going the entrepreneurship route but need connections, like maybe a VC route. Similarly to you, I think an MBA would be fascinating right now. I would probably learn a lot, but not anything I'm not going to learn from experience or not enough to justify the cost right now when I'm a co-founder. Like, I don't need it, you know?
So for someone watching this who has always been thinking about going back to school, they have a bachelor's and they're like, I want to go back to school, get a master's, get a doctorate, change careers. What should they think through? Like, what should they consider?
To me, the very first foundational thing is, why are you doing it? And like we've discussed, that can be, I think this will further my career or my earning power. And sometimes that's very, very black and white that it will. Sometimes you're taking a risk that it will. Do you want to learn? Do you need a change? I don't want to discount the fact that, kind of like you said, your path takes you where it takes you. So maybe you doing your master's didn't yield any direct translation to what you're doing now, but who's to say it didn't shape your path or provide, some experience that got you where you are.
Yeah.
So the friend I mentioned that got a counseling degree, she doesn't use that. She shifted her career completely again, but it's part of her journey, and maybe she wouldn't have ever gotten there, you know?
Yeah.
So there's value in that, of just paying for experience.
Yeah.
And then, the badge value, the proving it to yourself. So, okay, why are you doing it? How are you going to approach it practically?
Yeah.
What will it cost? What can you afford? Being very realistic about your resources in terms of financial, time, support in your life.
Yeah.
How will you make this work? Are you willing to sacrifice that and commit to it? And then, maybe the practical of like the actual applications and what it requires.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much aligned. Like, the why of why are you doing it? Dig into that. Like, not just surface level, but dig in deep. Like, go to your therapist and talk about it, like, before you make this big life decision. But also on the practical side, like, something that I've come across with clients is it feels all vague and fuzzy what the financial impact is going to be.
Yeah.
When you actually can forecast out what your cash flow might look like the next year or two while you're in school, right? You can forecast where your money's going to come from and what you're going to pay on things because it's all in front of you. I would suggest doing that before accepting a program, before leaving your job, before doing a major change, because then not only will you have a plan, but having that plan will give you peace of mind that you can actually relax and focus on your studies while you're studying.
And a couple points of that we've alluded to, include talking to your current employer. Will they pay for a portion of it?
Yeah.
Will they guarantee that your salary will go up if you get this degree, and by how much? And then doing research on the job market otherwise, if it's a career shift, or, you know, is there a higher salary range for positions that require that degree? So there's a lot you can do up front to arm yourself and to kind of project those things out. And then, you know, sometimes it's just the pros and cons.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think the benefits are? And trusting your instincts.
And you know your field best, right? We
Yeah.
alluded to the fields we're in, and we alluded to some of the professional degrees like law, medical, and business. But you know your field best. Are they hiring more people who have a master's in architecture in, you know, other fields?
Right.
You'll know if it's a differentiator or not.
Right.
In your
And
own
you can
field.
also always reach out to people on LinkedIn that have done that
And ask them.
and ask them, hey, was this worth it? How did it help you? You know, would you recommend it for someone else?
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be your best source.
100%. 20 cents?
20 cents.
20 Cents is the segment of the show where both Lizzy and myself, Lissa, each get 60 seconds to give our 2 cents on today's topic, whether it is a net positive or net negative for postgraduate degrees. Where does 20 cents come from?
Because you get the opinion of 2 dimes.
2 dimes. I actually don't know which direction you're going here.
I don't either.
So, Liz, 60 seconds on the clock. Are postgraduate degrees worth it for you?
Gosh, this is hard. I feel very neutral. I know I can't give that, but because I wouldn't change my path, but it hasn't been like some overwhelming benefit. The degree itself, the education that I forged out of it has been very positive. I think I will go net positive because I generally believe that you're going to get value out of that experience, even if it is not financial, whether that's in connections, the skills you attain, the worldview you get, or just the experience of having gone through something that's challenging. So I think I will be a net positive.
Interesting.
Yeah. In general, but I'm not about to do it again.
Yeah.
All right, what about you?
Interestingly, I've been going back and forth, and as you said your answer, I'm also leaning net positive. I don't know that my specific degree was worth it for me, but like you said, it probably had an impact on my path without me knowing it.
Yeah.
I do think I dislike the financial burden that education in general causes on people. It's starting off your adulthood and starting off your career in debt for most people who decide to get education is silly to me. Don't we want a more educated society? Like, there's got to be another way.
Yeah.
So aside from that, like the financial burden that it does put on people, I do think, like you said, you get a lot of value out of it from what you learn, the experiences you have, like you take on, and even the people you meet. That I do think, like, net positive. It was worth it for me, and I do believe it can be worth it for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One note that made me think of, because I don't want to understate the financial burden. If you are going into a field where you don't know that it will pay for itself or that part is shaky, you don't have to go to a private school.
Yeah.
There are a lot of state schools that have really reputable programs that are a fraction of the tuition, even for a graduate degree. It just depends. Like, if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to business school, the name value matters significantly.
Yeah.
Or it will pay for itself, most likely. But if you're going to be a social worker or, or whatever, something in the humanities,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to go that super expensive route.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I feel like undergrad, for some people, the name of the school matters more.
Yeah.
When it comes to like a postgraduate degree, I think the name actually does matter less, unless you're in a specific field. But it matters less. But regardless, you have a master's from an accredited university.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
just small note there.
Yeah. Well, remember, this is what we think at this moment in time. Both of us feel net positive for postgraduate degrees. That actually surprised me.
I know. Loosely positive.
But remember, no one can make the decision but you. What do you think? Are postgraduate degrees worth it?
Hit us up, let us know what you think. DM us on Instagram at NetNetPodcast or email us at hi@netnetpodcast.com. And if you want to follow us individually, here's where you can find us.
I'm at Wealth for Women of Color on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.
And I'm at live_well_Lizzy on Instagram and TikTok.
All references, statistics, and resources mentioned can be found in our show notes. This podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be constituted as financial advice. Remember to always do your own research, consult a professional as needed, and feel empowered to make your own damn decisions.